Good morning. I swear my internet does not love me. It makes me do this like 3 times before it lets me on, but at least I get on, so yay. Good morning. We are going to read chapters 11 through 17 today. And guess what? I found my original book. Look at that. That says Scholastic, $1.25. That's what I paid for this book. Or my parents. I don't know if I bought it or my parents did. You can say, put my little sticker on it. And they've actually got the Carly, Harvey, and Thomas J inside of Pinballs. Now, I'll let you see what the difference is. So they're trying to make the covers, more appealing to the newer generations because it's still a great book. But how many people nowadays would pick this one up versus this? I would, but I'm older than you guys. So I'm glad I found that. That's pretty cool. Okay, so yesterday where we left off, Mr. Mason had taken Thomas J, to the hospital to see the Benson twins, to visit them. And then he was asking questions about, did you see anybody on the road? What was I wearing? Was there a laundry mark on there to tell who I was? And there was not, but it kind of went back in time a little bit to where he was telling about living with the Benson twins at their house. And then they were watching TV and Snoopy comes on TV and they're like, that's it. That's the dog. So they did finally figure that out, but they still don't know who left Thomas J at their home. So, normally if something like that were to happen, you would call the authorities and, well, most people would, and let them know that, hey, a toddler just came walking up my driveway. So, but the Benson twins, back then they were probably like, oh, okay, well, we could use a hand around the house. I'm just kind of inferring what they might have been thinking at the time. Sorry, I'm getting my book together here. Okay, so we're going to start with chapter 11, and we're going to read through chapter 17, and then we'll finish tomorrow. I just about have my Zoom call set up. If you guys do not have an email or your parents don't have an email listed, I won't be able to invite you to the Zoom call. So if you have an email and your parents don't have it listed on your information, please email me at school and tell me what it is today so I can get you added to the Zoom call. I can't use your school emails because you don't have access to get into those, okay? So my few people that are watching, please pass it along to your friends. If I don't have an email address for you, I cannot invite you to our farewell Zoom call tomorrow. All right, chapter 11. It gave Thomas J a sad feeling to go in the Benson's house. It seemed emptier than a house without any furniture. He got the watch and the 3 coins, wrapped them in a handkerchief, and put them in his pocket. Then, without looking at Mr. Mason, he said, I want to see how the peas are. He went to the back door, but he didn't even have to step outside to see the garden was ruined. There had been no rain in 3 weeks, and the leaves on the plants were yellow. The vines were shriveled and dead. There were no tomatoes. He and Mr. Mason looked over the sad scene. Mr. Mason said, when you write the Bensons, I wouldn't mention the garden. It isn't likely they're going to see it this year anyway. I won't, he paused. I couldn't. When they were in the car and almost to the main road, Thomas J turned and looked back. Wait just a minute, he said. Mr. Mason stopped the car. Anything wrong? No. Thomas J felt like this was the last time he would ever see this house. He wanted to imagine himself walking up the drive in a shirt and diaper, lost, abandoned, dirty, tear-streaked probably. Being left behind had to make a baby cry. He tried to imagine the twins waiting on the porch, arms outstretched, then hurrying down the steps to hug him in his dirty shirt and diaper. He couldn't get a picture of it. Let's go, he said. They were halfway home when they remembered about the Kentucky Fried Chicken. Harvey was on the front porch waiting for them. When he saw them get out of the car without the red striped boxes, he felt like crying. He rolled himself back to his room and sat staring out the side window. There was nothing to see there but an uncut field. What's wrong with you? Carly asked from the door. Is the sight of me in my new halter too much for you? Leave me alone. What if I don't want to? Leave me alone. Carly took 2 steps into the room. I can't, she said. I get curious about what's bugging people. She sat down on the bottom bunk. Excuse me. That's because I'm going to be a nurse when I grow up and treat mentals. I'm not a mental. Huh, that's what they all say. Will you get out of here? Carly stretched out on the bed, her chin resting on her hand. Tell me what's wrong, and I'll decide whether you're a mental or not. Pretend I'm a nurse with a long beard. Tell me all. Through clenched teeth, Harvey said, if you must know, what's wrong is that I wanted some Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I'm not going to get any. They didn't get the chicken? Carly cried, sitting up. She was disappointed, too. She liked bought food much better than home cooked. I was really looking forward to that chicken. Not like me. Now we'll probably have hamburgers, Carly said, and they won't be Big Macs either. You can bet on that. They'll be cooked. Carly, Mrs. Mason called, give me a hand, will you? See? Oh, sorry. We're going to grill some hamburgers in the backyard. It'll be like a picnic. See what I tell you, Carly said. I'll probably get grease all over my new halter. And I really worked on this thing too. You saw me. At the door, she turned and said, I've judged your case, Harvey. She grinned. You aren't a mental. Thank you, Harvey said. After the picnic, Carly went to cheer Harvey and Thomas J up. Wanted to cheer Harvey and Thomas J up. So she said, I wish I had somebody to take my picture. Nobody answered. Thomas J sat without looking up. In his pocket was the Benson's father's watch and 3 gold coins. He had never felt a heavier burden. Harvey didn't look up either. His hamburger had tasted like sawdust. He wanted chicken more than ever. They're having a Sonny and Cher look-alike contest, Carly went on, and I want to enter. You don't look like Cher, Harvey said. I know. I'm going to be Sonny. That's a guy. She waited. There was no reaction. Oh, you guys, she said in a disgusted voice. What do I have to do to cheer you up? Go in the house, Harvey said. Excuse me. She spun around and looked at him and she grinned. You know, Harvey, maybe there's hope for you after all. So he was being sarcastic toward her and was kind of cutting her down a little bit, and she liked it. She felt like he was being humorous with her and kind of, giving a little back that she was giving. Chapter 12. What's the list for today? Carly asked, sitting down on the back steps. Oh, it's a list about disappointments. Not another one. That's what all your lists are about. I've never done this list before. It's called Gifts I Got That I Didn't Want, Harvey said. Like I was expecting one thing and got something else. That's the story of my life, Carly said. I expected a floating opal 3 years in a row, and you don't see it hanging around my neck, do you? There was a pause, and then Carly said, what bad gifts did you get? Well, they weren't exactly bad. Some people would have been pleased with them. But when my mom lived with us, she promised me a puppy for my 10th birthday. He paused. I really wanted that puppy. He paused again. My mom and me would look through the newspaper at night and read ads together, like Cocker Spaniels wormed and ready to go. It was the happiest time of my life. I wanted every dog I read about. I couldn't wait for the paper to come at night. I'd sit out on the front steps and wait for it. So, Carly said. Harvey looked down at his legs. So, my mom left home right before my birthday. She left on the 6th, and my birthday was the 17th. I thought only fathers left home, Carly said. I lost 2 that way. Wish it was 3. And after that, Harvey went on, my dad wouldn't get me a dog no matter what. It was a matter of principle. Okay, these are one of those words that sound the same but are spelled differently. This is Princeple. That means a matter of principles. Like, what are your principles? What do you believe in? Our principal at a school would be Principal. Okay. So words that sound alike but are spelled differently. He got me it was sort of an electronic football game. You had to turn knobs to keep the other team from scoring. Is that how you broke your legs? Carly asked, looking at him sideways, turning those knobs. Harvey ignored her. And then that Christmas, I decided to get a guinea pig. I really still wanted a puppy, but I knew better. And anyway, a guinea pig was something else my mom had promised me. She raised guinea pigs when she was little. One time she had 27 of them. She wanted to sell them to make money, but she couldn't bring herself to part with them. Woohoo, that tells you something about people, doesn't it? They can't stand to part with stinking guinea pigs, but they throw their kids around like straws, Carly said. Harvey went on. Anyway, I told my dad I wanted to buy my own Christmas present, and he said, fine with me. And I went out and got a guinea pig, a big white one. I named him Snowball right there in the store. I know what's coming, Carly said. And I got a cage, food, everything. And I brought him home. And my dad took one look at him, grabbed him up, and carried him off. He said it was a matter of principle. He never would even tell me what he had done with Snowball. Some people. To make up for it, he bought me a snooker pool table, but I never played with it. So that's a different kind of pool table. It's not the big, long, square one. It's a different shape. Google it, look it up. It's interesting. I've never played it, but I've seen one before. So he says he never played with it. And then Carly says, matter of principle. She grinned at him. He didn't answer. Thomas J. cleared his throat. He said, every Christmas, the twins gave me a present. Both Carly and Harvey turned and looked at Thomas J. Thomas J. had never learned the art of talking because the Benson twins didn't say much. Sometimes their entire daily speech was, water's boiling, and Cronkite's on, and I'm turning in. Therefore, it was always a surprise to Carly and Harvey when he joined in the conversation. What'd they give you? Carly asked. Well, one time it was pencils with my name on them. Oh, boo. That's the kind of thing you get for good behavior, Carly said. How would you know? Harvey asked. Carly grinned to herself. Go on, Thomas J. Well, one time it was gloves, and one time it was a book, big Bible stories for little people. Thomas J. fell silent. He remembered sitting beside one of the twins while she read the stories to him. He could see her gnarled finger holding the place on the page. His favorite story had been about baby Moses being sent out in a basket by his real mother to a better home. When he heard that story, he always imagined his own mother waiting by the road, hiding in the poplar trees, waiting to see the twins take him in. He wished he had thought to get the book while he was at the house with Mr. Mason. Suddenly he looked up. Oh, yes, they also gave me 3 gold coins. Real gold? Carly asked. He nodded. If I was you, I would rub them against my skin. If your skin turns green, they aren't real. That's how I found out about my earrings. They turned my ears as green as that grass over there. Lunch, Mrs. Mason called. Woohoo, Carly said, getting up. Don't tell me she managed to get lunch on the table without the slave of the world to help her. Things are looking up. So Harvey's kind of giving it back to Carly a little bit, kind of teasing. Teasing her back. Good morning. And, they're all kind of settling into their groove. You have to understand, too, if you went to a place, like if someone just came and got you from your house, even if something was going wrong and you're in a brand new place, that'd be really nerve-wracking and I'd be scared. So they're all kind of, settling down. It's been a few days now. Chapter 13. After lunch, Harvey persuaded Carly to push him to the library. It's mostly uphill, Mrs. Mason said in a doubtful way. I don't care, Carly said. Harvey and me want to get some books, don't we, Harvey? Carly was willing to go anywhere and do anything. She was bored. It's very steep. The library's all the way at the top of Oak Street. I know where it is. And you won't take your hands off the chair for an instant? Look, glue my fingers to the handles if it'll make you feel any better. I just want to be sure. She put her hand on the back of Carly's neck. And you'll be extra careful crossing the street? I'm always careful with valuable things. Thank you, Harvey said. She poked him. I meant myself. Mrs. Mason looked at them. All right, but you be very careful, Carly. Woohoo, you'd think we were going to the North Pole. They set out for the library with Carly pushing Harvey in a slow, rhythmic way. I'd like to give Mrs. Mason a scare, wouldn't you? Carly asked. We could get a dummy, dress him up in your clothes, and push him down the street. I'd run after the wheelchair screaming, Mrs. Mason, help, help. He got away from me. I'd do it if it wasn't so hot. Mrs. Mason's all right, Harvey said. Well, she hasn't done us in yet, Carly kept pushing. That's what I'm going to do a list about, people who have done me in. If you did a list like that, how many people would be on your list? Don't give me every name, just guess at it. Harvey thought of his mother and father. 2, he said. I'd have, let's see. Carly pushed the chair slower as she thought. First, there would be my father. I mean, I don't know who he is, but he'd be first on the list. You don't have a father? Harvey asked, looking back at her. Sorry, there's a bug. Of course I have a father, she snapped. Everybody has a father. The lowest dog in the street has a father. Didn't you learn anything in health and hygiene? She stopped to ease his chair down the curbing. I just never knew my father. He left before I was born. But my second father, he would have to be your stepfather, Harvey corrected. He was a step down anyway, Carly said. He was a real bum. Number 2 on my list of people who have done me in would be that stepfather. Before he left, he even stole my babysitting money. Harvey was silent. Then my third father, stepfather, if you must, he was the first person who ever wanted to do me real harm. I mean, you're always hearing how dangerous the streets are and how you're going to get mugged or hit on the head. Well, in the streets, I was perfectly safe. It was when I got home that I got mugged and attacked. Harvey said in a quiet voice, my father ran over my legs. That's how they got broken. He spoke so quietly, Carly thought she hadn't heard right. Ran over them? She stopped pushing the wheelchair altogether. Yes. Ran over them? Yes, in the car. Her shoulders sagged. Oh, wow. He said he couldn't help it, which is supposed to make everything all right. He said he got mixed up on forward and reverse. He was drinking. Oh, wow. Yeah. There was a silence. Then Carly said, just think about this, Harvey. Just think about you and me as unborn babies. Here we are, see, waiting to be born. And somebody comes up to us with a pad and pencil and says, what do you want in a father? Well, we'd list all kinds of things. I'd say, I want a father who's good looking. After all, Harvey, half of your looks do come from your father. And I'd say, I want a father who is rich and one who loves me. I'd go on and on. She rested herself against the back of Harvey's chair. Never once would I think to say, I want a father who will stick around. I mean, Harvey, he didn't even wait to see if I was a boy or a girl. He doesn't even know I'm me. She sighed. And you, never once would you think to say, I want a father who will know the difference between forward and reverse in a stupid car. She started pushing again, faster. I think that's the library up ahead, Harvey said. And then, Harvey, to make matters worse, here we are, totally unwanted. I think we have to admit that. And then there are people in the world who really want children and haven't got one. Life is really unfair. Harvey smiled a little. That's something I have suspected for a long time. So he's admitted to her now what has really happened. I'm sure it was kind of weighing on him lying, and he probably wants to talk to somebody about it. So, chapter 14. I thought you came to the library to check out books, Carly said. Ever since they had arrived, Harvey had been at the back table looking through old New York Times magazines. Remember, they got the New York Times magazine at their house, he and the dad had ripped it up and thrown it in the fireplace because his mom was in it. Carly had flipped through 17 and Cosmopolitan, and then she had gone to the librarian's desk. Do you have any movie magazines? No. Comics? No. So now she was ready to go. Get some books and let's leave, she said to Harvey impatiently. I'm staying until I find an article I'm looking for, Harvey said, turning the pages in a determined way. What's it about? If you must know, the article is about my mother. What'd she do to get in the newspaper? Well, she went to live on this farm in Virginia with some people. They were going to start a new way of life, and that's what the article is about. I want to find out exactly where the farm is. What for? So I can write her. Why don't you just ask your dad where the farm is? He's bound to know. He had to send the divorce papers somewhere. He wouldn't tell me. He won't even talk about her. He bent over the magazine again. If my mom knew I was in a foster home, if she knew about these broken legs, well, she'd come get me. I know she would. And take you to the farm? Yes. Where you'd live happily ever after? Yes. Carly was silent for a moment. Then she said, Didn't your mom ever write you? Oh, sure, she wrote. Well, wasn't there a return address? I never got the letters. Oh, sure, she wrote, but you never got the letters? Just like my mom wrote, but I never got the letters. No, she really wrote. I know she did, only my dad tore up the letters. He closed the magazine and picked up the next. The article has to be in one of these. I'm getting bored, Carly said. Aren't there any cute boys in this town? She spun around. Hey, I think I'll go see if they have Appalachian Nurse. She went back to the desk. Suddenly, Harvey came upon the article about the farm. When he saw the picture of his mother making the hammock, he felt as if his heart had blown up like a balloon. His mother was looking down at the ropes. She had a serious look about her. There were 4 rings on her fingers, but no wedding ring. He read the article carefully. Everyone at the farm, the article said, changed their names and selected other names that were more suitable to their nature. As near as he could figure out, his mother's new name was Bithynia. In the evenings, he read, everyone at the farm sat around and had discussions. Sometimes one person would sit in the center on a stool and offer himself for discussion. Everyone would then tell what they liked and didn't like about the person on the stool. Harvey had a hard time imagining his mother sitting there, letting herself be criticized. At home, the least thing made her furious. If his father called her casserole earth food, she sulked. Good news, Carly shouted, coming toward him. Appalachian Nurse. She waved the book in his face. And it starts out real good, too. Listen. Nurse Lori Myers made her way over the dark road. She was tired, but she knew men had been injured in the mine and needed her. Carly glanced up. Did you find what you were looking for? Yes. Oh, let me see. Which one's your mother? That one. I never pictured your mom looking like that. Hey, he's cute, the one on the left. Carly's a bit boy crazy, if you haven't figured out by now. She didn't look like that when she lived with us. Well, let's go then, she said impatiently. I want to get a Xerox copy first. That's a copy machine. They used to call them Xerox machines because that was the popular brand. And it could have been the only one. I'm not sure. There's something to Google and learn about. He wheeled himself to the desk. Can you copy this article for me? It's 10 cents a page. I've got the money right here. He dug into his pocket. Carly said, listen to this. In the depths of the mine lay Michael. One of his arms was caught under a mine timber. Carly glanced up. See, they're begging Lori not to go in because of the danger, but she's going in anyway. She flipped through the pages. This is really good. Here's the end. Michael looked at Lori. He must have got out of the mine all right. He took her in his arms. See, Harvey? She even saved his arm. He said, my life will always be yours because without you, I would have no life. Lori answered softly, without your love, there is no life for me either. They kissed. Carly slammed the book shut. Now that's what I call a real satisfying story. She set it on the counter. The librarian came back and said, that will be 90 cents, please. Harvey counted out the money and took the article about his mother. Carefully, he got the pages in order. As Carly pushed him to the door, he glanced up and said, oh, you forgot your book. She looked at him astonished. I just read it. You saw me. She opened the door, held it with her shoulder, and pushed him out into the sunlight. She sighed with satisfaction. It was almost as good as Hong Kong Nurse. So what she's done is she's read the first page, flipped to the middle, read a little bit in there, and read the end and called it good on reading the book. I mean, for all we know, he could have a prosthetic arm because she didn't read the whole story. So how would you know what happened? Chapter 15. Harvey's father was coming for a visit, and Harvey was waiting on the front porch in his wheelchair. He was sitting as still as a statue. Carly, let him see his father alone, Mrs. Mason said when she saw Carly heading for the front porch. I will. Then stay in the house. I'm going for the mail, she said. The mail is already here. It's there on the desk. Anything for me? No. For Harvey? No. What's wrong with the mail these days anyway? Carly asked. People are going to quit buying stamps if the post office doesn't start delivering letters. She kept going toward the porch. Carly, Mrs. Mason warned, I mean what I say. I don't want you out there when Harvey's father comes. I won't be. I'll come back in the house as soon as he gets here. I just want to get a look at the kind of creep who would run over his own son's legs. Who told you that, Carly? Harvey told me. She turned. I wonder if he'll have the nerve to come driving up in the same car. Over her shoulder, she said, Anyway, when the creep comes, I will come right into the house. Girl Scout's honor. Do we think she was a Girl Scout? Before Mrs. Mason could say anything else, Carly went out onto the porch. She sat on the railing in front of Harvey. Harvey was too nervous to fidget. He was sitting with his hands tightly clenched, his teeth clamped together. He had not seen his father since he came to the Masons, and the only thing he could remember about his father was him weeping in the emergency room. His tears falling on Harvey's burning face had seemed to sizzle. Is that his car? Carly asked. No. Because I'm supposed to go straight in the house as soon as he comes. Mason's orders. Carly paused. She began swinging her feet back and forth. Mail came. Nothing for you or me. I know. Hey, maybe your mom's not at the farm anymore. Did you ever think of that? She could be anywhere. Then I'll get my letter back. The return address was on it. I know my mom got my letters. She just won't answer. For all I know, she's left the state. Carly kept swinging her legs back and forth, hitting the heels of her sandals against the railing. If you weren't in that wheelchair, we could go looking for your mother. What? Yeah, she said. She was pleased with the thought. We could just take off. I'd really like to see the farm. I'm bored with this place anyway. Aren't you? Are you talking about running away again? Carly looked at him. Why do you have to make everything sound so bad? Run away. Nobody's going to run away. You've been watching too many Shirley Temple movies. We're just going to take off. Split. She glanced at the door to see if Mrs. Mason was within hearing. Then she turned back to Harvey. You know, it really isn't a bad idea, Harvey. I couldn't go home because they'd pick me right up. But this farm? No. Why not? For one thing, I'm in a wheelchair in case you haven't noticed. Listen, the wheelchair would make it easier. It makes you look pitiful. Nobody would turn us down for a ride. I could step out and stick your thumb out. And you could hold up a sign that said, I couldn't do it. Harvey, you could. Listen, I don't want to talk about it, but I don't want to talk about it. All right. We won't talk about it. You don't have to jump down my throat. She paused, then said, anything interesting in your lists today? What? Your lists. Anything interesting? Okay, before I go on, just a disclaimer, don't hitchhike. It's very dangerous. Remember, this was written in the 70s. Do not go out and hitchhike. People are crazy. So she's asking him about his lists, and he says, oh no. Harvey's eyes were on the street. His father would have to come over the crest of the hill. What's your latest list about? What? Oh. Harvey touched his forehead. He was too nervous to remember. He said, oh, I don't know. Let's see. Oh, yeah. It was just something I read that interested me. Nothing important. What? I read somewhere that one day everybody will be famous for 15 minutes. Woohoo. If that's true, I wish my 15 minutes would hurry up and come. I am so bored. And I'm making a list of ways, if I get the 15 minutes of fame, well, the ways I would want it to be. What do you want to do? Splash down into the Pacific in a rocket ship? Discover a new germ? She straightened. You know what I'd want? I'd want a 15-minute TV special. I'd come out in a low-cut, shiny dress like Cher, and I'd be so good that everyone would say, "Who is she?" And she's going to be a star. Carly grinned. That way, my 15 minutes would just be the beginning of a whole lot of 15 minutes. I'd stretch it out like an all-day sucker. Harvey was still looking at the top of the hill. I keep hearing a car, but I don't see it. Carly said quickly, how do you want to be famous? I don't know. I forget what I put down now. He looked down at his legs. I just hope it's not for something bad. Like what? Oh, like maybe I've already had my 15 minutes. Maybe when my dad ran over my legs. He looked at Carly. I mean, everybody in town knew about it. Everybody was talking. People were driving past our house. Maybe that was my 15 minutes. Nah, they didn't just drive past your house for 15 minutes, did they? Not if I know people. More like 2 or 3 days. No, you're going to be famous. Hey, you'll be a writer. I know you will. You'll write bestsellers. I don't know. Look, I was in the newspaper too one time, only they just called me a juvenile. You think I consider that fame? A juvenile? Nah, it's going to be more than that. You'll be a famous writer, and then you can write a movie for me. I'll get to be a star that way. That's his car, Harvey said. He made a move as if he was trying to get to his feet. A pain shot through his legs. Are you sure? It's the same car. Carly got to her feet. Then I'll go inside as promised. At the door, she turned. If you need me, I'll be right inside the living room. She got serious. You wouldn't believe, Harvey, what good help I can be in a fight. So Carly's kind of coming around. She's being nicer. And now she's offering to back him up if something goes wrong out on the porch with his dad. So that's sweet. Chapter 16. Harvey watched his father coming up the walk. There was no expression on Harvey's face. Everyone had always told him that he looked exactly like his dad, and he realized it was true. Yet inside, he had always felt more like his mother. Well, how's it going, son? His father asked. He took all 3 steps in one bound. Then he looked uneasy, as if he wished he had taken more time. All right, Harvey said. His father cleared his throat. Looks like a nice place. His father was in construction, or had been until the building business went bad. It's all right. Any other kids? 2. That sounds good. Company. He paused and cleared his throat again. Then he said more seriously, what kind of kids are they? They're all right. I mean, kids in a foster home. Well, you never know. I'm here, Harvey said. Oh, well, yeah. Harvey's father still had not looked directly at him. And the legs? He asked. They're all right, Harvey lied. Well, that's good news. He paused and then sat in the wicker rocker. He pulled at the turtleneck of his shirt. Look, about the legs. He still had not looked at Harvey. I don't want to talk about it. Well, I just don't know what got into me, that's all. Sure, I had just lost a contract. Sure, I just had a couple of drinks. Sure, the car was new. But that still doesn't excuse it. No. It was quiet on the porch now. Carly had turned off the TV in the living room. Anyway, you seem to be getting on real well here, his father said with false cheer. I've never seen you looking better. Except for the legs. Oh, well, yeah, sure. There was another silence. Oh, guess what? I brought your birthday present. I didn't forget the big day is this Friday. Oh? It's right out in the car, only I'm not going to let you see me carry it in. You might guess what it is. His father got to his feet abruptly. So abruptly is a synonym for quickly. I didn't say that earlier. Well, what do you say? Let's go get something to eat. I don't know if I'm allowed. Sure you are. Your own dad? He went to the door. Mrs. Mason. Carly's face popped into view as quick as a jumping jack's. I'll get her. She ran into the dining room. Mrs. Mason, Harvey's father wants to talk to you. He wants to know if he and Harvey can go get something to eat. It was a relief to Harvey when his father left. He felt as flat as an old tire. He could hardly wheel himself into his room. How'd it go? Carly asked. She was leaning against the doorway in another halter. So far, she had made 11. Harvey lifted his shoulders and let them drop. What does that mean? It went all right, Harvey said in a flat voice. Actually, it had never been all right, but the worst moment had come in the restaurant when Harvey had said, I wrote a letter to my mother telling her what had happened. He hadn't planned to say it. It just slipped out. His father had swallowed hard and wiped his mouth with his paper napkin. Did you? He asked. There was no expression in his voice. Yes, but I haven't heard from her. You won't. I think I will. Harvey put down his fork and looked up at his father. He said, She probably wrote to me dozens of times over the years, only you never gave me the letters. This was something he had always suspected. He had even searched the trash cans for scraps. She never wrote you. I don't believe that. Harvey was holding his fork in both hands as if he was going to snap it in two. She wrote and you tore up the letters. You probably flushed them down the toilet. He looked across the restaurant at a fat woman begging her thin son to eat just one more French fried potato. Look at me, son. Harvey's father's voice sounded so low and strange that he had to look. She never wrote you, he said. Not one time. He pronounced every word carefully. She would write if she knew I had 2 broken legs. She didn't write when she knew you had the appendectomy, which, by the way, means getting your appendix taken out. She didn't know about that. I wrote her. How about the measles? I wrote her then too. And she didn't answer? No. I don't believe you. No. As soon as his father said no in that way, Harvey knew it was true. He suddenly felt old and tired. He looked down at the fork in his hands. A moment before, he had felt as if he could snap it in two. Now he could no longer even hold it. He let it drop to his plate. He looked up at his father, taking in all his features. Maybe, he thought, it was because he looked so much like his father. Could his mother, hating his father, hate him too, just because of his looks? She was always saying, "You're your father's son," and he had known it was not a compliment. But could she hate him because of his looks? Eat your supper, son. All right. Is your steak too tough? No. Well, eat. Harvey picked up his fork. He barely had the strength to move his baked potato. Finally, he managed to cut his potato so it looked eaten and to hide some of his steak, but he couldn't eat a bite. Carly was still standing in the doorway. Where'd you eat? She asked. Bonanza. Lucky, we had tuna casserole. One night, I'm going to make tacos for everybody. Are they good? Carly stood in the doorway watching Harvey's back. Harvey was trying to get the strength to lift himself onto his bed. He wished for one of those special hospital lifting bars. Carly said, Oh, by the way, one of the Benson twins died today. You know, the old ladies Thomas J. used to live with? She came into the room. Or did you hear about it? No. Heart failure. Oh. It was Jefferson that died. Hey, guess what the other twin's name was? I can't. Thomas. Get it? Thomas and Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson. She hooted with delight. Woohoo, how's that for names? You know, one time somebody told me they knew twins named Pen and Pencil, but I didn't believe it until now. Harvey sat silent in his wheelchair, hunched forward like an old benched player. So he's like this. Thomas J. is leaving in the morning to see the remaining twin and go to the funeral and all. She sighed. Everybody here is having some excitement in their lives but me. You go off to Bonanza and Thomas J. to a funeral. She paused. Harvey was still staring at his bed. I don't think I can make it, he said. What? Oh, you want to lie down? Here, I'll help you. She started forward. No, I don't think I can make it, period. Carly stopped in the middle of the room when she realized Harvey was talking about more than getting in bed. Harvey, you have to make it. I really don't think I can. Because Harvey, listen, you're one of us. You and me and Thomas J. are a set, and I've got used to you, Harvey. When I get used to somebody, I don't want anything to happen to them. She walked over to his wheelchair. Look at me, Harvey. No, look at me. He glanced up. His face was pale. His eyes were dull. His lips had a smudged look. I promise you can make it, she said. He lowered his eyes. And I don't make promises easily, Harvey. Listen, I promise you can make it. After a moment, he said, I really don't think I can, in a flat, quiet voice. Carly stared at Harvey. Then she closed her eyes. She said, you know, when I get my driver's license, the first thing I'm going to do is find your father and run over his legs. See how he likes it. She stamped out of the room and into the kitchen. I never thought I'd say this, Mrs. Mason, but give me something to do. You want to work, Carly? I've got to take my anger out on something. So Harvey is obviously extremely depressed right now, and he's telling Carly he just doesn't think he's going to make it. And she's telling him, yes, you're going to. So she is starting to like both of them. Chapter 17. Thomas J. didn't want to go back to the hospital. There was something upsetting about seeing only one twin, because the Benson twins had never been separated before in their lives. Other twins Thomas J. knew went to different schools and wore different clothes, married different men, and moved to different towns. But not the Bensons. They had stayed together and looked alike all their lives. They had never even worn different dresses. People took their pictures in town sometimes. As they drove to the hospital, Mr. Mason said, I know this is hard for you, Thomas J. I remember my first funeral. Thomas J. looked up at him. It was an old man who worked for my father. Mr. Joe, they called him. And Mr. Joe was laid out in his house. I don't know what laid out is. Well, it just means he was in his coffin there in his house. Oh. And I remember my daddy picked me up so I could see Mr. Joe in the coffin. And my knee must have hit the coffin and jarred it. And Mr. Joe's mouth came open. I never will forget that. I ran all the way home, 17 blocks, and hid under the bed. Oh. Kids don't do that anymore, hide under the bed. But we were always doing it if we were scared or wanted to cry without anybody seeing us. Thomas J. was quiet for a moment, and then he said, It's not really the funeral that I'm worried about. I'm not scared about that. What are you worried about, Thomas J.? Well, going to the hospital. Why is that? I don't know. It's something I can't put in words. It's just standing there and just one twin and all and not knowing what to say. Only sometimes you do a person a real favor by standing there, Thomas J. Just the fact that you're there can be a comfort. I don't feel like a comfort, Thomas J. said. He paused. I want to say something, but I can't. One of them's already dead, and the last time I didn't hardly say anything. I won't be able to say anything today either. I know I won't. Excuse me. Mr. Mason looked at him. I'll tell you something, Thomas J. I never told this to anybody in my life, but when I was your age, my mother died. Now, she was a good woman, real good, but she was never one to show affection. The twins were like that. I can never remember my mother hugging me or kissing me, not one time. That makes me sad every time I read it. I can't remember the twins doing that to me either. They patted me one time when I found their father's watch. They patted me on the head and shoulders, but the word love was never mentioned in our house that I can remember, Mr. Mason said. Mine either. So I went to the hospital and I was standing there by the bed, just like you, Thomas J., not able to say anything. And all of a sudden, my mother opened her eyes and said, Colin, that's my first name. She said, Colin, tell me you love me. Well, I just stood there like a stick. The word love had never been said to me in my whole life. Mine either. I mean, I know she loved me. I guess she did anyway. She took good care of me, and I must have loved her, but I'd never said the word in my life. I haven't either. And so I just stood there. The nurse punched me in the back and said, say it, because she knew my mother was dying. And my dad yanked my arm and said, say it. I just stood there. I did love her, I guess, but my throat was as dry as sandpaper and I couldn't say a word. I couldn't have either. Well, finally, the nurse, bless her heart, stepped up to the bed and said, "He said it, Mrs. Mason. Did you hear him? He said it real soft, but he said it. He loves you." And my mother smiled and closed her eyes, and that was the last time I ever saw her alive. To this day, I am grateful to that nurse, Miss Brown, her name was, for helping me out. It was nice of her. Thomas J. paused and thought, I guess if mothers want you to tell them you love them, they should start real early training you to do it. This was the longest and deepest speech Thomas J. had ever made, and he looked quickly at Mr. Mason to see what he thought about it. Mr. Mason was nodding. I think you're right, Thomas J. He kept staring at the road ahead. You know, I think that was one of the reasons I wanted to marry Ramona. Mrs. Mason? Yes, because she was always touching people and hugging them and telling them how she felt about them. It seemed to come so natural to her. It appealed to me. It should come natural. Would you believe it took me 5 years of marriage, 5 years before I could tell my own wife that I loved her? Mr. Mason said. Yes, Thomas J. replied earnestly. I can believe it. That's the end of chapter 17. So for those of you that joined later, here's my book. I or my parents paid $1.25 for this on Scholastic. And of course, I had to put my name on it, with my little cute stickers. But see how there's Carly and Harvey and Thomas J. inside of Pinballs. And then compare it to this one. Carly's in the middle. Harvey's the one with glasses. And then Thomas J. is over here with the crazy haircut. Okay. So what they've done is when they reprinted in later years, they gave you a more updated copy because they felt probably it would be more appealing to younger people. So, and for those of you who joined later after I was talking this morning, on a Zoom call, I have to have an email to add you to the Zoom call. So you guys share with your friends, share with everybody you know that I have to have emails. I'm going to wait to finish setting up the Zoom call till this evening at, let's say, 6 o'clock. So any other email addresses I get between now and 6 o'clock today, I'll be able to add them to the Zoom call. So please pass the word along. Tomorrow we'll finish up and then we will have our farewell Zoom call at noon, 12 o'clock noon. So I guess that's all for today. I miss you guys. Our year is wrapping up. It's kind of crazy, I know. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you and see you tomorrow. Bye.